Okay, what's going on at this hour? Where are you right now? You want to know where I am? I'm on a spa vacation. With Luna? Oh, I see. I found everything out when my husband lied to me. My name is Kate. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I've been married to my husband Daniel for 6 years, and we have a 6-year-old daughter named Luna. We got married during my pregnancy, and Luna is growing up to be a wonderful girl. Mom, I'll help you. Really? Can you roll the hamburger patties like this? Yes, I'll do it. There you go. Oh, Luna, you're so good at this. Here's one for Dad and one for Mom. That's a big one for Daddy. Daddy's had a tough day at work, so he deserves the big one. He might even cry with happiness. As I enjoyed cooking with my daughter, my husband emerged from the bath. Luna ran to him and said, "I made your hamburger, Daddy." He was thrilled and responded, "Really? I can't wait to eat it." We were living as a happy family, or so I thought. Both my husband and I worked, but he had a shorter commute and fewer overtime hours, so I often asked him to pick up Luna from kindergarten. Lately, though, he'd been coming home later due to work commitments, and I had to pick her up and bring her home. Mom, does Daddy not like me anymore? My heart ached as Luna asked this on our way home from kindergarten. She missed him because he usually picked her up, and now he came home so late, sometimes missing her entirely. I comforted her, even though my own heart was breaking. Daddy is working very hard for us right now. Once things settle down, he'll have more time to spend with you. Really? Yes, really. So let's support him together, okay? I'll cook for him. Luna smiled, a truly good girl, and said, "I can't wait until we can eat together as a family again." But as months passed, Daniel's work schedule remained erratic. He'd come home at 2-3 a.m. or sometimes even take the first train home in the morning. I started to wonder, are you sure it's work? If you're just out drinking, I wish you'd come home to spend time with Luna. I couldn't take it any longer and decided to confront my husband. Luna has been left alone by her father for a month, and she looks so sad, I said, trying to express my frustration. But instead of understanding, my husband grew defensive. What's with that tone? I attend company drinking parties for the sake of our family. It's unfair of you to accuse me like that. Whoa, okay, I'm sorry, I replied, feeling a pang of guilt. But you have to understand, Luna is feeling lonely because she hardly gets to play with her dad. My words seemed to hit a nerve. He fell silent and retreated to the bedroom, leaving an awkward silence between us. Soon after, I received notice from work that I needed to go on a short business trip. There were several things I needed to check in person, and it looked like I'd be away for at least one night, possibly two. My first concern was what to do with Luna. My parents lived far away, so it would be challenging for them to come and help. I would have to rely on my husband, but given how busy he'd been lately, I wasn't sure if I could trust him with her. Still, I had no choice but to ask him. I waited up for him to come home, wondering if he had been drinking as usual. By the time he arrived, it was well past midnight, around 3 o'clock, to be exact. The sound of the door unlocking signaled his return. "Welcome home," I greeted him. "Kate, I didn't realize you were still up," he said, clearly surprised to see me waiting. "I stayed up because I wanted to talk to you." "Talk?" He looked taken aback, and I noticed he was visibly drunk, his face flushed. As he took in the situation, he suddenly looked pale. He sat down at the dining table, his gaze fixed on me. "So, what did you want to talk about?" "It's not a big deal," I said, trying to keep my tone calm despite his agitation. "I just wanted to let you know that I have a business trip coming up. It's short notice, but I need to go in 2 weeks on Friday. I would need to stay at least one night, and if there was a lot of work, I might have to extend it to 2 nights. Can you take care of Luna while I'm away?" I asked apologetically. "I know you're busy with work." My husband looked relieved. "Oh, that's totally fine." "Really? Are you okay with that?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "Of course," I replied. "I'm busy, but I should prioritize you and Luna." "Actually, how about I take a day off and take Luna on an overnight hot spring trip?" he suggested. "I haven't had much time to spend with her lately. I'm sure she'd love that." I was relieved to hear him say that. It reassured me that he cared about our family. Until recently, I had been worried about whether he truly valued us, but it seemed my concerns were misplaced. The next morning, as I was taking Luna to kindergarten, I told her the news. "What?" she asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy and I are going on a hot spring trip together," I said. Luna's face lit up with happiness, and seeing her so excited made me happy too. Then came the day of my business trip. It was my first trip since Luna was born, but it went smoother than I had anticipated. The people I met were very organized and had everything ready for me to review. I finished my work by 7 p.m. and thought to myself, if I'm done already, maybe I can go home today. I wasn't sure if I would need to stay one night or two until I assessed the status of my work. I had planned to spend the first night at a manga cafe instead of a hotel to avoid any cancellation fees. With this plan, I could catch the last train home if I managed to get a ticket. I looked forward to a relaxing evening at home if necessary. Hastily, I boarded the train and headed back. I imagined my husband and daughter enjoying a nice meal at the hotel, and the thought of my daughter's happy face eased my mind. I planned to wake up early the next morning, clean the house thoroughly, and surprise them. I arrived home around 11 p.m., wondering why the living room light was still on. I thought maybe my husband had simply forgotten to turn it off. With a critical look, I went inside and was met with a distressing sight. My daughter curled up on the sofa, crying. "Oh, Luna, what's wrong?" "Mommy," she sobbed. "Why are you crying? Where is Daddy?" My husband was nowhere to be seen, and I felt a surge of frustration. I needed to get answers from my daughter. "Daddy left in the morning without me," she explained between tears. "What? What is going on?" I thought, furious at my husband's irrational behavior. I knew I needed to calm Luna down first. I pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I know it's hard being alone so late at night." As I comforted her and stroked her hair, Luna began to relax and eventually fell asleep in my arms, feeling the warmth and safety of my embrace. Luna seemed exhausted from the fear and anxiety, so I gently carried her into the bedroom. After settling her in, I went back to the living room and called my husband. "Kate, why are you calling at this hour? Where are you?" "I'm at a spa trip with Luna." "Why are you whispering?" "Luna is already tired and asleep. I don't want to wake her." "Oh, I see. I'm sure she's asleep, but she's not with you, is she?" I realized my husband had lied to me, and though I was close to losing my temper, I managed to stay calm. "How's the trip going?" "We're having so much fun. I wouldn't mind staying another night. The food is great, and the hot springs are wonderful." "Well, why don't you stay another night then?" My husband hesitated, clearly unsure. "But Kate, you'll come home after one night, right?" "I'll be home later than planned. I have a lot of work to do, so I'll need to stay another night. Don't worry about me. Enjoy your trip as long as you like." He didn't question my excuse. "Really? Then I'll extend the stay for one more night." Luna is very excited. I knew Luna needed more time with her daddy, especially since I hadn't been able to give her much attention in the past month. "Make sure you call me when you know when you're coming home," my husband said. "What are you talking about?" She was curled up and crying by herself. I fought the urge to yell at him and ended the call, determined to ensure he faced consequences for the distress he caused Luna. I called my parents who explained the situation and quickly began packing. The next morning, I contacted a moving company. Thankfully, they could come that day, so I arranged for them to move my belongings out. Luna watched in confusion as the movers came in and began taking things away. "I need to talk to you," I said gently. "Luna, I've decided that we won't be living with Daddy anymore. I don't want you to be sad. I'm going to quit my job and move in with Grandma and Grandpa. That way I can spend more time with you." I added, "If we move to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you won't be able to see Daddy as often. What do you want to do?" I felt it was a tough question for a 6-year-old, but I wanted to understand her feelings. "Will I never see Daddy again?" she asked, her voice muffled. "If you really want to see him, I can arrange for you to visit occasionally, but he won't be living with us anymore." Even though my daughter had done nothing wrong, I wanted her to have the chance to see her father if she wished. However, given that he had gone on vacation while leaving her alone at home, I doubted he would make much time for her after the divorce. As I considered all this, Luna seemed to come to a decision. She looked me in the eyes with resolve and said, "I'm going with you, Mommy. Daddy probably doesn't care about me." I cried out, asking him why he was leaving me, but he walked away without a word. My disgust for him grew deeper. To abandon his 6-year-old daughter just to go on vacation with his mistress was unforgivable. He was a terrible man, a poor father, and a disgrace. I regretted leaving Luna with him for the business trip if it meant this would happen. "I'm so sorry for making you so sad, Luna," I said as I hugged her tightly. We began preparing for the move, determined to start fresh. As for my husband, I decided to leave him to his own consequences. With that thought, I took Luna and headed to my parents' house. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was my husband. "Hey, why is all your stuff gone? And Luna's stuff too. What's going on?" "Don't you know why?" I replied. "Of course not. Luna's crying because her stuff is gone too. Are you still trying to lie to me after everything?" My husband seemed confused. "Luna is now eating noodles that my mother made." "What?" he asked, bewildered. "We already know you left Luna alone to go on a trip with someone else. How could you leave a 6-year-old girl at home? You're not fit to be a father. If I hadn't come back when I did, you could have traumatized Luna for life." My husband was silent, realizing I was already with Luna. He had no excuses left. It was clear he didn't care about his daughter and was willing to leave her alone just to be with another woman. "I can't live with you anymore. I want a divorce," I said firmly. "Divorce? Oh no, please think about it again." "I can't. I don't want to see you anymore." As I spoke with my husband on the phone, the doorbell rang repeatedly. Oh God, who could it be at a time like this? I wondered aloud. My husband sounded irritated, but I knew who was at the door. "It looks like they've arrived," I said, hearing my father-in-law's voice rise in anger through the phone. A moment later, I heard my father-in-law shout, "What the hell are you doing?" followed by a loud thud. It seemed that was the sound of him getting physically confrontational. My father-in-law, a longtime judo practitioner and now a university advisor, had always adored Luna. When I told him about my husband's infidelity and how he left our daughter alone, he was livid. He had vowed to make my husband pay for his actions. "What the hell do you think you're doing with your own daughter? I didn't raise you to be like this." My father-in-law's angry voice echoed through the phone. Living on the first floor of our apartment had its advantages. At least there wouldn't be complaints from downstairs neighbors. But since we had already moved out, it was no longer a concern. My father-in-law's intervention ensured that the divorce process went smoothly. I was awarded full custody, and my husband paid alimony and child support in one lump sum. I even managed to secure additional alimony from his mistress. My husband's attempts to remarry his mistress failed. She was only interested in a fling and didn't want marriage. Now, he faced shame at work, had been disowned by his parents, and had lost both his mistress and his daughter. As for me, I'm finding happiness at my parents' house, spending quality time with Luna. My parents are farmers, so I help them with their work, and Luna enjoys the fresh vegetables from their farm. She seems to thrive in this natural setting, and I'm committed to putting her needs first. Leaving the young child alone while chasing after an affair was inexcusable. In retrospect, perhaps I should have involved the police to hold him accountable. But seeing him lose everything he held dear brings a sense of justice. Kate, I hope you find continued happiness with your daughter.
Love is like proof of youth. It's the best thing ever.
Ken's words echoed in my mind, spreading a dull ache in my chest. That ache slowly ate away at me as I was forced to accept the reality of his betrayal. Kathy, my younger sister, and her daughter Amy had entered my life, which felt like a nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare, it was reality. Ken had become infatuated with Amy, who resembled my sister Kathy, and for 18 years he had continued this affair without my knowledge. My heart was utterly shattered when I realized the truth. "You should just get divorced already." Amy's cold words pierced me like a sharp blade. I had believed that Ken and I had spent so many years supporting each other, but that trust crumbled away knowing that his gaze had shifted from Kathy to Amy. Still, I wasn't going to back down easily. The fire of revenge that had slowly grown from small suspicions and pain had become my only source of strength. I knew at that moment that the truth would come to light. I stayed, determined to witness the looks on their faces when everything crumbled. The thought of how their peaceful days would soon be shattered filled me with grim satisfaction. My name is Emma, and I'm a 45-year-old housewife. I've known my husband Ken since childhood, as we lived in the same neighborhood. My younger sister Kathy is 2 years younger than me, and we all used to play together. Ken was always gentle and kind. He was more important to me than just family. After high school, we started dating, and by the time I was 25, we were married. We wanted to have kids right away. However, we soon found out that Ken was infertile due to low sperm count. The doctor told us that it would be impossible for us to have children. We were devastated.
What do we do now?
Ken had asked me that quietly one day, and I remember it as if it were yesterday. We'll live together, just the two of us. I responded without hesitation, believing that as long as I had Ken, nothing would scare me. But then, out of the blue, Kathy called me to say she was getting divorced. Kathy had married right after high school, and by now, she had a 5-year-old daughter named Amy. She swore she would raise Amy on her own. Kathy and I had been through a lot together, especially after losing our parents when we were still in high school. We had supported each other through everything, so her decision to divorce and raise Amy alone was a huge shock to me. Sis, I can't take it anymore. Kathy's voice sounded exhausted. She had clearly struggled for years, but her determination to raise Amy on her own seemed so brave to me. To help her out, Ken and I decided that the 4 of us would live together. Since we didn't have children, we felt that taking care of Amy was our way of helping out. I treated Amy like my own daughter, and Ken also poured his affection into her. Amy was a sweet child, and Ken once said,
I wish I could be her father.
His words struck me as odd at the time, but I laughed it off. Over time, however, Ken's behavior towards Amy started to change. His excessive affection for her began just before Amy started elementary school. Up until then, Ken and I treated Amy naturally, and Kathy trusted us to take care of her. We were happy to play the role of her parents. Since we had no children of our own, Amy became like a ray of light in our lives. At first, I didn't think Ken's behavior was strange. In fact, I thought it was heartwarming to see how much he cared for her. He would buy her toys and books and play with her every night.
What do you want to play today, Amy?
Ken would always ask her this with a smile. Amy adored Ken and eagerly awaited his return from work every day. Hey Ken, let's play with this today. Amy affectionately called Ken Ken, which I found cute at first, but Ken grew overly protective of Amy, rushing to comfort her even at the slightest sign of sadness. One day we were at the park, and Ken kept a constant watch on Amy as she played with her friends. The moment she stumbled, he rushed over to scoop her up.
Don't worry, I'm here for you,
he said as he hugged Amy, and though she seemed a bit confused at first, she quickly smiled and hugged him back. But something felt heavy in my chest at that moment. I began to worry that Ken's overprotectiveness might hinder Amy's growth. I quietly tried to talk to Ken about it. Don't you think you're being a bit too overprotective? Ken looked surprised for a moment, then smiled and said,
I'm just worried about her. If she ever got hurt, I wouldn't know what to do.
Though his concern seemed genuine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Still, I decided to trust his words. Even after that, Ken's behavior toward Amy didn't change. If anything, he became more and more obsessed with her. He wouldn't leave her side when we were at home. He found excuses to hug her or pat her on the head constantly. Maybe you should give Amy some space.
I'm just making sure she feels safe. You're worrying too much, Emma.
Ken's words were said without malice, as if I were the one overreacting, but the sense of unease I felt continued to grow each day. When Ken got home from work, the first thing he did was check on Amy. He wanted to know every detail about what she had done, what she had said, and who she had spent time with. His constant questioning started to feel unnatural to me.
Emma, do you know who Amy's friends are at school? I'm really curious about who she's hanging out with.
I guess they're just normal kids, but why do you care so much?
No reason, I'm just worried. What if she's being influenced by the wrong people?
Ken's words sent a chill down my spine. As the years passed, Amy grew into a high school student. One day I came home and saw Ken inside Amy's room. The door was slightly open and I could overhear their conversation.
Amy, you're so beautiful. Don't let any bad guys take advantage of you.
His gentle voice made my skin crawl. Amy responded, but her voice was too quiet for me to hear clearly.
Don't worry, I'll always be here for you.
His words no longer carried the warmth they once did. Instead, there was an unsettling sense of possessiveness. I couldn't move, frozen in place, unable to process what I was hearing. When Ken finally left Amy's room, I confronted him. Why were you in Amy's room? What were you doing? Ken looked startled for a moment, but quickly regained his composure.
I was just talking to her, that's all. There's nothing to worry about.
I wanted to believe him, but my heart was filled with doubt. Ken's behavior no longer seemed like just concern. His obsession with Amy only grew, and I started to feel a distance forming between us. It didn't take long for me to realize that Ken's fixation on Amy was destroying our marriage. By the time she became an adult and moved out to live on her own, the warmth in our home had vanished. Ken seemed restless, and our conversations dwindled. Just as Ken and I were starting to adjust to life as a couple again, Kathy paid an unexpected visit. Kathy, it's rare to see you drop by unannounced. What's going on? I'm sorry for showing up so suddenly, but I need to talk to you about something important. Kathy's face was serious without her usual smile, and I had a bad feeling about what she was going to say. What's wrong, Kathy? Did something happen? Kathy took a deep breath and began to speak hesitantly. You and Ken have always been close, right? How are things between you two now? What do you mean? We barely talk anymore. Kathy's eyes darted nervously, and it was clear she has something important to say. After a few seconds of silence, Kathy spoke slowly. I saw Ken and Amy together entering a building near the station. Near the station? What do you mean? The two of them together? My mind went blank the moment Kathy's words sank in. What she was saying seemed impossible. That's not possible. Amy and Ken together? It must be a mistake. I tried to deny Kathy's words, refusing to believe such a thing could be true, but Kathy's face was serious, showing no signs of dishonesty. She looked pained, as if telling the truth was causing her agony. I didn't want to believe it either, but I had to know for sure, for your sake, so I hired a private investigator to look into it. Kathy had hired a detective to gather evidence. There's no mistake. Her words shocked me to the core, and fear crept over me. If Ken and Amy really were involved, what would become of my life? The investigation report Kathy handed me revealed something far worse than I had imagined. Detailed photos and accounts of Ken and Amy sneaking around together filled the pages. It even included photos of them entering and leaving a shady establishment near the station, and intimate photos of the two of them together. It was undeniable proof of their relationship. Tears flowed uncontrollably down my face. I had raised Amy as if she were my own child alongside Ken, only for them to betray me like this. That night I made the decision to confront Ken. When he returned from work, I handed him the report. Ken, what is this? Why are you and Amy going to places like this? What's going on? Ken looked startled for a moment, but he quickly regained his calm.
Oh, that? Well, there's no point in hiding it anymore. Yeah, Amy and I are together. It's been 18 years now.
Without hesitation, he admitted to everything. His heartlessness left me feeling both angry and devastated. 18 years? Since she was 5 years old? My voice trembled as I tried to comprehend. I had raised Amy as my own daughter, and yet behind my back this had been happening.
No, it didn't start when she was 5. She's always been special to me. She reminds me of Kathy when she was younger. It's the best feeling in the world.
What did you just say? I couldn't believe my ears. She reminds you of Kathy? What does that mean? I had never imagined that Ken had feelings for Kathy, but it became clear that Ken had been in love with Kathy all along. However, Kathy had always been popular and out of Ken's reach, so instead, he married me.
Kathy never showed interest in me, so I settled for you. But it wasn't so bad. You're good at housework and you're kind-hearted.
His words broke me completely. My entire marriage had been built on a lie. We've been together for 18 years. You have no right to complain about us, Aunt Emma. Amy, who had just returned home, suddenly entered the living room and coldly said this to me. Amy, what are you doing here? Why shouldn't I be here? Mom told me you wanted to talk to me. I stared at her in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the sweet child I had raised could hurt me so cruelly. Just give it up, Aunt Emma. You need to get a divorce. Ken belongs to me now. Her words felt like a nightmare, like something out of a bad dream. She then pulled out her phone and showed me pictures of her and Ken together, smiling and happy. See, we're happy. You're not needed anymore. The sight of Ken and Amy smiling together in those pictures was the final blow. How could this happen? My voice trembled, but neither Ken nor Amy responded. They simply laughed at me, mocking my pain. At that moment, something inside me snapped. The betrayal by the people I had loved was too deep for words to express. Quietly, an intense anger began to burn deep within me. Their arrogance and disregard for my feelings only fueled my resolve. I knew I had to deliver one final blow to them. When Ken left the room to go to the bathroom, Amy and I were left alone in the living room. The silence between us was heavy. The silence didn't last long. Ken says he prefers someone younger than you. He's always liked Mom, you know. You don't stand a chance. Amy's words were like a cruel taunt, and I was shocked at how heartless she had become. I had never imagined that the sweet child I once adored could turn into this cold, calculating person. I see. Well, are you ready for what's coming? I calmly pointed at the photo in Amy's hand. It was a picture of her and Ken smiling together, looking happy. But what I pointed at wasn't Amy, it was Ken. Amy looked confused for a moment, trying to understand what I was implying. Then a bitter smile crept across her face. What's that supposed to mean? You're just jealous because you've already lost. I sighed deeply, realizing that Amy still didn't understand the gravity of the situation. She had no idea that her victory was short-lived. Just then, Ken returned from the bathroom, and moments later, Kathy walked into the living room. Kathy and I exchanged glances, and she nodded slightly. Without hesitation, Kathy pulled out a photo and handed it to Ken and Amy. Take a look at this. Kathy's voice was calm, but filled with a quiet fury. Ken and Amy's faces paled as soon as they saw the picture.
What is this?
Ken's voice wavered with a mix of surprise and fear. The photo showed Ken with another young woman, someone other than Amy, clearly in an intimate situation. What is this? Who is she, Ken? Amy's voice trembled as she questioned him, but Ken was too stunned to respond. His face turned pale, and his mouth twitched. The love he had promised Amy had been a lie, directed at another woman as well. How could you do this? I wasn't the only one? Amy's voice was filled with despair, and disbelief flashed across her face. But she had no choice but to accept the truth. Ken had betrayed her too. It's over. I spoke quietly as Amy stood there, crushed by the revelation. Then I turned to Ken, who looked defeated and at a loss for words. This is who you really are, Ken. You've betrayed me, Amy, and now this other woman too. You're a pathetic excuse for a man. Ken stood there, speechless. The man who had once been so confident and charming was now reduced to nothing. It's time to end this, Ken. There's no reason for our marriage or your relationship with Amy to continue. I spoke with finality, my voice calm but resolute. Ken's face was a mix of regret and hopelessness. Amy, on the other hand, was frozen in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Suddenly she snapped, throwing anything she could find in the room at Ken. Amy, stop it! Kathy quickly stepped between them, trying to calm her down. You're not going to keep doing whatever you want in this house anymore. You're cut off. Get out right now. Wait, Mom! You're not going to abandon me, are you? Abandon you? After everything you've done, you expect us to stay by your side? You betrayed the people who cared for you. I'm done with both of you. Kathy's voice was steely and firm, and neither Amy nor Ken had time to react. Sis, we're done here, right? Let's end this. Kathy turned to me and I nodded in agreement. Yes, it's over. I pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Ken. It was a divorce settlement.
Wait, Emma, we don't have to go this far?
Oh, we do. After 18 years of betrayal, this is exactly what needs to happen.
But I still love you, Emma. Please, don't leave me.
Love me? You've loved how many others as well? Name them. My words poured out in rapid succession, and even Amy looked stunned by my sharp tone. This divorce settlement has been ready for over a year. I've known for a long time. There's no point in apologizing now. It won't change anything. You're out of my life, both of you. With those final words, Kathy and I took our first step toward a new chapter of our lives. We decided to leave behind the betrayals of the past and reclaim our future. Ken, despite his protests, was forced to sign the divorce papers, and I filed them the next day. I moved back to my family's home with Kathy, leaving the apartment where I had spent so many years with Ken. Amy moved back into her own apartment, but I no longer cared about what happened to either of them. The house we had shared was no longer my home. Kathy and I needed a quiet place to recover and move forward, so our family home was perfect. About 10 days after moving, we received an unexpected visitor, Amy. I never imagined she would show up at our door. When I opened the door, there stood Amy, looking lost and desperate. Mom, please help me. Her voice trembled as she begged us for help, her once arrogant demeanor completely gone. Kathy stood beside me, waiting for Amy to explain herself. It's rare for you to come here, Amy. What happened? She hesitated before speaking, her voice shaking. It's Ken. He won't leave me alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What do you mean? Explain it to us. Kathy stayed calm, urging Amy to continue. Ever since we broke up, Ken has been stalking me, waiting outside my apartment and calling constantly. At first I ignored him, but it's getting worse. I'm scared. Amy's voice was filled with fear, but as I listened to her, a cold feeling began to spread through me. And why are you coming to us for help? Do you even understand what you've done? My tone was sharp, and Amy fell silent for a moment before raising her head. I know what I did was wrong, but I didn't think it would turn out like this. I didn't expect Ken to become so obsessed. Her words left me speechless, her lack of self-awareness stunning. You know you're the one who seduced Ken, right? And now you come to us for help? That's not how this works. Kathy spoke firmly, and Amy began to cry, looking at us with desperation in her eyes. Please, I really don't know what to do. I'm terrified. Amy's voice was pleading, but neither Kathy nor I felt any sympathy for her. You reap what you sow, Amy. This is your fault. Please, don't abandon me. I don't feel safe anymore. You made your bed, now lie in it. You'll have to deal with this on your own. My words were cold, and Amy looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Despite her tears, I felt nothing. After everything she had done, I had no reason to help her. Go home, Amy. This is no longer our problem. Kathy's voice was even harsher, and Amy was left speechless. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. Remember, Amy, the choices you make always come with consequences. She didn't look back as she left our house. Kathy and I stood in silence for a while, the heavy atmosphere lingering in the air. We did the right thing, right, sis? I took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, we did. Amy and Ken had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences of those decisions. A few days passed, and then we received a call from the police. I was shocked when they told me that Amy had been arrested for assault. Apparently, Amy had been trying to get rid of Ken, who kept stalking her. She had a new boyfriend who tried to chase Ken away, and during the confrontation, Ken was injured. It was Ken who called the police, and Amy was arrested on the spot. When they resisted, Ken was hurt and had to be taken to the hospital. As I listened to the police officer explain what had happened, a sense of emptiness washed over me. Both Amy and Ken had destroyed their lives with their own actions. What happened, sis? You look pale. Kathy asked with concern as I hung up the phone. I explained the situation, but I couldn't shake the hollow feeling inside. Both Amy and Ken had been driven to ruin by their own desires. There was a hint of pity, but more than that, a deep disappointment settled in my heart. What a mess. It's like they have no one to blame but themselves. Kathy's words made me nod in agreement. I wasn't surprised to hear that Ken had been injured. In fact, the thought of him being embarrassed by this whole ordeal crossed my mind. What I hadn't expected was that Ken would be hospitalized for a month due to his injuries. When I got the details from the hospital, I felt no emotion. It was as if all of this had become distant, like it was something that had happened in the past. After being discharged, Ken was forced to recuperate at home, but I had no intention of taking care of him. Our relationship was already over. Whatever happened to him from now on was none of my business. Despite this, Ken started calling me for help.
Emma, I'm at rock bottom. Please, help me.
His voice, once so full of confidence, was now weak and pitiful. Help you? With what? Ken fell silent for a moment before pleading again.
Emma, I regret everything. Everything I did.
Regret? It's too late for that. You can't undo what you did. My words silenced him again, and all I could hear over the phone was his heavy breathing, filled with despair. Meanwhile, Amy was given a suspended sentence, but her boyfriend received a prison sentence. The moment he went to prison, Amy dumped him without hesitation. Her cruelty was beyond anything I could comprehend. Amy's life continued to fall apart after that. She was fired from her job and faced severe financial difficulties. Despite everything, I felt no sympathy for her. This was the path she had chosen. Amidst all of this, I decided to file a lawsuit against Ken and Amy for damages caused by their affair. They needed to pay for the betrayal they had committed. To my surprise, within a week of filing the claim, both Ken and Amy transferred the full amount of compensation. I can't believe they paid so quickly. I was shocked when I saw the deposit notifications, especially because I never imagined Amy would have the money to pay. However, the mystery was soon solved. It turned out that Ken had paid Amy's portion of the compensation. When I realized that Ken had covered for Amy, I was speechless. He still had feelings for Amy, enough to help her even after everything. Then, Ken made an unexpected proposal.
Emma, I paid Amy's share too. Can't we just start over?
His voice was filled with desperation, as if he was trying to regain his former confidence. Start over? After everything that's happened, how could you even think that's possible? You betrayed me, you betrayed Amy, and you expect me to forgive that? My words were sharp, and Ken fell silent again. He had nothing left to say.
So, are you just going to leave me like this, Emma?
What are you talking about? It turned out that Ken had originally planned to get back together with Amy. He had paid her portion of the compensation, thinking they could restart their relationship with a clean slate. Amy had agreed to this, but as soon as Ken paid the money, she disappeared from his life. She had used him to settle her debts and then abandoned him. When I learned that Amy had left Ken, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. It was poetic justice. Ken had been so obsessed with Amy, and now she was gone. I was genuinely curious about how Ken, who had been financially struggling, was able to come up with the money so fast. It turned out that Ken had borrowed the money from a loan company. When I found out, I was speechless. You borrowed money just to pay for the damages? I muttered to myself, unable to believe how far he had fallen. Ken had been so desperate to settle the debts that he had pushed himself even further into ruin. Why would he do something like that? I asked Ken over the phone, his voice tired and hollow.
What else could I do? Amy and you would have left me otherwise. I had no choice.
Ken's voice cracked as he explained how he had used up almost all of his savings and had even lost his job. What do you mean you lost your job? Ken hesitated before answering.
I couldn't focus on work because of everything with Amy. I kept taking time off and eventually I was fired.
His confession left me stunned. I couldn't believe that Ken's obsession with Amy had driven him to the point of losing his job. What are you doing with your life now? I asked, my frustration growing.
I'm barely managing with the money I borrowed. The hospital bills, the compensation, it's all gone.
Ken's voice was filled with despair, and I realized that he had truly hit rock bottom. He had lost everything because of his actions and was now stuck in a life of debt. But my feelings weren't of pity. They were of disappointment. I was ashamed that I had ever loved a man like him. This is the result of your own choices, Ken. You followed your desires and lost everything. There's no going back now. My voice was cold as I ended the call. The man I had once known as Ken no longer existed. I later learned that Ken continued to struggle under the weight of his debts, scraping by day after day. His life had become a shadow of what it once was, and he was left with nothing but regret. Meanwhile, Kathy and I slowly began to rebuild our lives. Living together, we supported each other and filled our days with laughter. Our family home, though old, was peaceful, and we found joy in the simple things. Spending time with Kathy helped me regain my sense of inner peace and gave me the strength to move forward. Then one day, while we were watching the news, Kathy's face suddenly turned serious. The screen displayed a report about Amy. It seemed that she had been involved in a scam pretending to be engaged to multiple men and stealing money from them. The news anchor described the details calmly as Kathy turned off the TV without a word. You know, I can't take responsibility for what Amy does anymore. She's my daughter, but I have no idea where she is or what she's up to. There was a trace of sadness in Kathy's voice, but also a sense of finality. I sat beside her in silence, accepting that Amy and Ken were no longer part of our lives. They're gone from our lives for good, aren't they? I murmured quietly, and Kathy nodded. We sat there for a long time, not saying a word. The pain and suffering of the past no longer lingered in our hearts. The only thing left from that time was a lesson, to live our own lives. With that lesson in mind, I started a new job, and our days became filled with purpose again. We laughed, we cried, and we moved forward, free from the chains of our past. Sis, let's always stay together, okay? Kathy smiled warmly, and her words filled me with gratitude and happiness. Of course, Kathy, we'll always be together. We held hands, promising to walk this new path together. The shadows of the past were long gone, and a bright future lay ahead of us.